Thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. And before we get into this episode of God Talk, if you haven't heard yet, the news is we have a new Pope. He's an American, which was always thought that an American wouldn't become a Pope because America is so influential on the world stage politically. They don't necessarily want that same level of influence also then in the church. But apparently the guy that they chose has been doing ministry in Peru for over half his life, so they felt safe with him. I had a buddy of mine saying, well, they're going to need a new pope soon because of the guy's age. He's 69 years old, and just a little bit of information, the Catholics intentionally try to get popes that are around upper 60s to 70 because they really don't want them to reign or rule for more than a decade, because then their influence on the church becomes greater than what they're comfortable with. So there's politics even in the Pope, in choosing a Pope. I think John Paul II was one of the longer ones that they had. I can't remember exactly how many years, but he had a significant reign. I think maybe 30 some years. I could be wrong on that, but way longer than most. And the church really did not like that kind of generational influence that he had on the church. So they almost always are going to pick popes that are at the twilight of their lives so that, well, if you get a bad one, you don't get stuck with them. So much for God directing the process. Just in case God's wrong, they want to get an old one. So we'll have to see how this all turns out and where the church goes. But that's not what this episode of God Talk is about. This episode of God Talk is actually about keys to overcoming spiritual attacks. And I don't know if you've ever had a spiritual attack. Chances are you probably have had a spiritual attack. You just didn't realize that you've had a spiritual attack. And so spiritual attacks can come in a variety of different shapes and sizes. Sometimes it is literally a spiritual attack where you're being attacked by demonic forces. I like to listen to different podcasts and watch different shows about not just about the paranormal, but really that give for me insight in terms of how Satan and his forces work. And sometimes that is more paranormal, and sometimes it's just the evil we see in humanity. But a crazy story I came across, I don't know, a month ago or so, and it's about this guy named Christopher Case. And back in 1991, Christopher was a worker for a company called Muzak. I don't know if you remember that back from the late 80s to 90s. I always thought people just couldn't pronounce music when they would say Muzak. But Muzak was responsible for finding the music that you would play in dentist offices, doctor's offices, malls, and so forth. They couldn't play the popular music of the day, David Bowie or Michael Jackson or whatever, because that was all licensed and would be way too expensive to include in the music track. So they hired this guy, Christopher Case, that went out and was to dig up music that would be appropriate for those type of settings, but that they wouldn't have to pay a fortune to purchase the rights to. Well, Christopher went out to meet this woman in San Francisco who was trying to introduce him or sell him or just I don't know. I don't know exactly the transaction of it, how she would have owned the rights to the music, but it was kind of some more ancient type music. And anyways, she starts hitting on Christopher during this dinner meeting. And I know everything I'm telling you sounds like just a story. No, you can actually search the name Christopher Case, 1991. Strange death, or however you want to Google it. You can find all kinds of news articles on this. Made a lot of big news stations and newspapers in its day. But anyways, this woman hits on him, and he's 35. She's 10 years his elder. She's 45, and he's not interested for whatever reason. So he rebuffs her kind of propositioning him during this dinner business meeting. And she did not like the fact that he declined her propositions, and all of a sudden she just starts flipping out and starts putting all these curses on him and says that she's a witch. And Christopher didn't believe in any of this stuff, so he just kind of abruptly ended the dinner meeting and got up and left. He shared with a couple of out-of-state friends that were his closer friends about this bizarre kind of encounter, but he really blew it off. He wasn't overly religious and certainly didn't believe in witchcraft. Well, he gets back to Seattle, and don't you know, as soon as he gets back to his apartment, all of a sudden he's seeing like shadow figures, he's hearing voices, he's having all this paranormal experiences, and he doesn't even believe in this, and he's not even overly religious. Well, over the course of the next week, he makes 2 different trips to a bookstore, and I think it was specifically a Christian bookstore, and this is documented. He bought Christian books on basically how to fight off demons and evil and all this other stuff. The first day he went and bought the stuff, and then a few days later he came back and bought more. Meanwhile, he's sharing with his friends that like these attacks are getting more and more intense. He doesn't know that he's going to survive it. And a week after he comes back from being cursed by this witch in San Francisco, all documented, he's found dead. And when he's found dead in his apartment, they find him in his bathtub, fully clothed, surrounded by salt around his bathtub in candles, and he's in a kneeling position. They find him dead in a kneeling position with his hands crossed like he's praying in his bathtub, and that's how they find this 35-year-old dead. They did toxicology on him, nothing in terms of toxicology to account for what happened to him. Eventually, they end up basically attributing it to inflammation around his heart, and that's what killed him. But a crazy story. And so, maybe you believe it, maybe you don't. But like I said, Christopher Case, Case. Research it if you don't believe me. There's even some podcasts out there on it that go much more in depth than what I just did. So spiritual attacks can come in forms of that. I mean, evil is real, and Satan attacks. It also can come through if you're religious at your work. Maybe you have a Bible on your desk, or a cross that's somehow displayed on your desk or whatever. In the past, there has been companies that force their employees to take that down. We've all heard the stories of the wedding photographer that chooses not to do the gay wedding, or the baker who chooses not to do the same. And next thing you know, you're being sued. And what is that? That is a spiritual attack. Like Christians trying to take a stand will be sticking their neck out, and Satan's going to come after you and will attack you. Maybe you work for a company and you help people and you share your faith. Not all the time, but like when people are really hurting, maybe clients you're dealing with, or kids in your classroom, or whatever. Like you will at times ask them if they have faith and have they've been praying about this or whatever. Like when you do that, you put a target on your back as well. And I'm here to tell you, like, spiritual attacks happen, and sometimes they happen through the loss of job. Sometimes they happen through persecution, and sometimes through paranormal, like I mentioned to start this podcast. And then sometimes it's even through evil people. The spiritual attack comes. Heard another crazy story just the other day, and this one's still trying to be solved. But there was this 76-year-old pastor in New River, Arizona. His name is Bill, I think it's like Schoenman. And so Google this too, because this is a crazy story. He's a 76-year-old, super nice guy, no enemies. It's a type of small town where people leave their keys in the car all night long and they don't think anything of it. Well, this guy was just a pillar of the community. And on April the 28th, they found Bill dead in his house, and it appeared that he was experienced a fair amount of trauma, and they found him with his arms outstretched in his bed, with his hands pinned to the wall. So you can envision like laying there in the bed, maybe like your head up against the wall or the backboard of the bed, the headboard, and the, all the articles, and there's a ton of news articles on this, hands pinned to the wall, arms outstretched. I don't know if that means like nailed, but you can picture this crucifix type situation. What's weird is it's a super small town. They've ruled it a homicide, but they say no one's in danger in the town. And are they just saying that to keep people calm? Do they not know who would have done this? Do they have an idea? Are they trying to figure it out? Was this like a paranormal thing? Or was this an evil person that came after this old pastor? Once again, a spiritual attack, and someone flesh and blood comes and crucifies this old pastor. Just crazy stuff out there, right? And so as you're listening to this podcast, I don't know what you're going through in your life right now, but I think most of us have experienced spiritual attacks. So the question is what are some keys to being able to overcome spiritual attacks? Well, first of all, you're only going to undergo a spiritual attack is like if you're standing up for your faith and for Christ. And maybe the simple thing is to not, so that you're not spiritually attacked. But I can't help but think of the words of Christ that says, anyone who acknowledges me before men, I will acknowledge before my Father in heaven. And anyone who disowns me in front of men, I will disown before my Father in heaven. And I think like the implications of that are far reaching. Maybe it's when someone asks if you're a Christian, like that you embrace that and you acknowledge God. But other ways that we acknowledge God is how we live our lives, and that we're willing to share our faith and even put our jobs on the line, and do the right thing rather than maybe what our companies or what other people would expect of us. And so I don't think we have a choice but to subject ourselves to spiritual warfare. So what are the keys to kind of overcoming those spiritual attacks? Well, I think the first thing that kind of comes to mind is that once you've realized that you're going to be attacked, if you're faithfully following the Lord, the second key is that you got to not be afraid. You know, when angels appeared before men in the Bible and women, they would always say, "Fear not." When we're spiritually attacked, the first thing is just to panic, right? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to maybe even go to jail because I was just trying to help this person and it was counseling this person? Now this person has made accusations against me. I haven't done anything wrong. I mean, the first gut reaction is ultimately to be afraid. You know, as I watch these different paranormal shows and see how evil attacks and so forth, the constant theme in almost all of these are when these demonic entities attack these individuals who usually bring this upon themselves by doing something they shouldn't do, like investigating a graveyard or seances or Ouija boards or such. Like the first thing that comes to my mind is like, if I was to be attacked by a demonic force that way, I think my first indication wouldn't be to run. Like I think I'd just like lash out and try to pummel the demon. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand demons are way stronger than we are as men. But then again, I think of that passage where, you know, Jacob is wrestling God, right? And I mean, God's humoring him. Not that man can really wrestle God, but I mean, it talks about he just wouldn't give up. So I mean, I get my butt kicked, but I think first and foremost, I try. And so I'm not saying that you necessarily try to wrestle a demon, but what I'm saying is when you're being attacked by the evil one, whether that's in the flesh or in this world or even spiritually speaking, don't back down, don't cower, don't be afraid. Like God is behind you, and don't take matters into your own hand, because the realm of the spiritual realm and evil is so much more powerful. Scripture says that angels don't even make accusations against Satan, basically, but rebuke him in the name of the Lord. And so I think part of fear not is that you rely on God, that to know that God is stronger than whatever spiritual attack that you're going through. And so that's where you see that in the paranormal, where you see that in the spiritual with the Catholic priests, they're not going in there as just men, just like putting a demon in a headlock and giving them a noogie or giving them the business. That's stupid, right? But they do it in the name of the Lord, right? They know that they're just mere men, but they call and evoke the name of God with great faith, and in great faith, then God is able to drive these demons out. So in the flesh, don't be afraid. In reality, don't take matters into your own hand, but turn to God, because God is bigger than whatever spiritual attack you might be going through. And then the next key, I think, is this, is that you got to keep your head up. You know, I know that people come after me sometimes, and I know that they're going to come after me. And I try not to be a jerk in how I lead the church. I try to speak the truth in love. I try to treat people well, but I also know that at times Satan's going to take a shot at me, and I'm here to tell you, if it's someone making a false accusation, if it's just anything that comes to mind, like if I'm not in the wrong, I mean, keep your head up. And you might be in the wrong at your work because you violated work policies by talking to someone about their faith. Well, you know what? Great. You're in the wrong in the terms of this world, but you're not in the world of your Father in heaven. So keep your chin up. Let Satan attack you, but you have nothing to be ashamed of. Don't be afraid. Rely on God and keep your chin up, because you have the backing of the Almighty God of heaven and earth. And you have nothing to be ashamed of when you are faithfully following God, and then that puts you at risk of being attacked where you are attacked by someone else. Keep your chin up. Whatever you're going through right now, if you're unfairly being persecuted by family, if your spouse is not a believer and there's a lot of tension going on there, or whatever it is, don't doubt, don't give up, keep your chin up. Because ultimately, and this is kind of my last point, is God's not going to abandon his faithful. Sometimes it might even be our believing spouse or our believing friends that attack us, because they can fall under the influence of Satan too. So once again, make sure that you're operating according to God's will through prayer. Talk to other people who are spiritually mature. But in the end, like, put your trust in God. He won't abandon you. He will not forsake you. Your spiritual attack might be that you're going through an illness. And you know what? You might die from that illness. You might lose your job. You might this and you might that. But listen, even in the midst of all that, God will not abandon you. Don't doubt him. He's going to be faithful. And even if something costs you your life, then what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to go straight to heaven. If something costs you your house and your home and your fortune or your job or your ability to stay in the house that you're in, you know what? In the end, you're going to receive your treasures in heaven. I just feel like in this world today, there's a lot of spiritual attacks going on. And maybe Satan uses that to try to keep us from standing our ground as Christians and holding to the truth. But I just want to encourage you, wherever you're at, whatever you're going through, if you're going through a spiritual attack now, or if you're going to go through one in the future, because you will go through them regularly if you're living out your faith, that put your trust in God and know that Satan and his minions have no power over you. You have nothing to fear, and keep your chin up. Well, I thank you for joining me for this episode of God Talk. I hope you have a wonderful day, wonderful week, and I look forward to talking to you next time. God bless.